may begin.
Okay. I'd like to call the meeting to order.
Mr. Chair, we have a new member that was appointed at the select board meeting of the 28th of June. And I would allow him to introduce himself to everyone who is in attendance.
Sure, thank you. So, hello everybody, my name is John Terry. I'm very excited to be on this Water and Sewer Rate Committee, believe it or not. So I talked to John Tallarico before, but not to any of the other members. And I know Mike Rutsky a little bit from prior work. I'm a resident of Needham, of course. I've been living in Needham since '94, and I retired from Bank of America last year after almost 30 years as a controller in several lines of businesses. My last job, I would say, was working in the technology infrastructure space, developing applications to handle basically technology infrastructure project management. Ironically, or fundamentally enough, my first job out of business school was working for the MWRA advisory board. I graduated from BU and I got an MBA there in public management in '92. And I worked for the advisory board from '92 to '94. And that was the year that the legislature entrusted the advisory board to come up with a new wholesale water and sewer rate methodology for the 61 cities and towns that are part of the district. I think it's still 61, I don't know. So that winter, the winter of '93, I was the staff person who kind of worked on the models and did work with Coopers and Lybrand and the executive committee to do the whole thing, and then worked on the public meetings. And then when it came to implementing the water and sewer rate methodology, I moved over to Mass Water because I was really the only person who knew how it kind of came together. At the time, it was just a big spreadsheet model, essentially. So I worked at Mass Water from '94 to '97 and did a bunch of other things there. Then I left and I went to Fleet. And the rest of that is not really water and sewer related. It's mostly technology, private equity, and treasury. So anyway, I really appreciate the opportunity to be on this board. I don't know, I'm really interested in this topic. I have 3 daughters. The eldest has a friend who's a wastewater engineer up in Portland, Maine, where they're working on their CSO issue there, that they basically had a memorandum. Anyway, they've been made to do something after 20 years. So every time I go up to Portland, I go to the construction site to check out what they're doing. And it's interesting things. It's interesting for me. So that's it. That's my spiel.
Great. Well, welcome to the committee. We have another JT on the committee. Are there any questions for John or? Okay. Should we move to the second agenda item, which is the approval of the minutes from our June 23rd, 2022 meeting?
Mr. Chair, we didn't have an opportunity to get those minutes distributed to everyone, so there's no action to be taken on that item. We'll take it up at the next meeting.
Okay. All right. So I guess subsequent to the discussion we did have on the 23rd, Dave, where you did run us through the numbers past and looking forward, there were a few options that we had asked to be presented to the committee in terms of how we potentially may want to move rates for the, I guess, coming fiscal year. So have you had a chance to put together different proposal for us or different options?
Mr. Chair, yes, I did, and it's part of the packet that I sent out via email the other night. I will do a screen share so folks remotely can follow along. And there we go. Are people seeing?
Yes.
Preliminary for discussion only. Town of Needham Water and Sewer Rate Structure Committee. Is that what people are seeing on their?
Yes.
Yes. Very good. Very good. So again, at our last meeting, I had presented several things. One, of course, the history of consumption and usage, the history of the rates, what the forecasted shortfall would be if the same rate structure was kept in place for the coming years. Again, as a reminder to the committee and certainly for our new members' benefits, how we approach rates, we use a series of averages. We look at what is the 3-year anticipated average of expenditures or appropriations for each of the enterprise funds. And I look at the average. So we looked at, in this case, we are looking at fiscal 23, fiscal 24, and fiscal 25. And then I take that average amount to determine what a revenue target would be to generate through rates. The second thing is we look at, in terms of determining the billable consumption, we also use a 5-year average. And of course, consumption is a very volatile number, depending if it's a wet year or a dry year. So looking at just 1 year or looking at just a couple of years can be problematic. So we tend to look at a 5-year average of usage to try to smooth out the impact of year-to-year changes. The other item that was contributing to what was back in 2020 needing to increase rates more than was traditionally necessary was the departure of the Coca-Cola bottling operations. They were a hefty contributor. More than 99% of their billable volume was at the top rate, the highest rate in the rate structure, as you're probably well aware. Under DEP requirements, communities must have an inclining block rate. So in other words, the more that you use, the higher rate per unit you pay, which is sort of contrary to what people are accustomed to in bulk usage, that the more you use, the unit cost usually declines as an incentive to purchase more. So it's contrary to standard economic model. So what happens when consumption is reduced? It's the greatest revenue per unit that is lost. So that's one of the things that contributes to a problem that when why we need to be mindful of our consumption estimates. But also we had to recognize that a significant revenue loss was going to be realized, and in fact, the subsidy that's been provided to a great number of the ratepayers of Needham was being lost. So that was factored into the rate recommendations basically 3 years ago, that was going to phase in the increases over 3 years to capture the loss in the revenue from the Coca-Cola shutdown of bottling operations. And mindful, although their operation closed, there was a minimal impact in cost reduction. one of the things that I always say is the most expensive gallon of water is that first gallon of water, because the whole infrastructure has to be there to deliver the first gallon, not the last gallon. So basically Coca-Cola's departure and their decline in usage saved us a little money in terms of drinking water chemicals. But other than that, and a slight decline in volume going to the MWRA for sewage. So, so that was another mindful thing with the loss of Coca-Cola. Very little to be saved on the expense side, and a notable reduction on the revenue side. The select board was agreeing to the recommendations, and that was the plan. COVID struck, and basically each year the select board held the rates flat, didn't make any increases. So we're a few years behind in adjusting the rates. That gets us up to today, and to what I am here to walk through. There were several scenarios that presenting. The first thing that's changed from the June 23rd meeting to this meeting is in terms of the cost assumptions in the out years in the water side of the operations, based upon consumption to date for water usage. And we're not 100% reliant on MWRA water. They're the supplement for when we have additional demands that exceed our capacity to generate water from our wells, or if there are times that we need to curtail or shut down our operations because of usually something associated with a significant maintenance, either at the treatment plant or with the major water mains. But based upon that assumption, I've held the assumption for the water assessment at a level dollar for 24 and 25. Which effectively reduced our expenses in the revenue target for water by $60,000. So originally, we were looking at the need to generate $6,152,000 in water receipts when we met on the 23rd. That is now a number of $6,092,000. There is no change in terms of the sewer assumptions. So now,
sorry, Dave. What was the number again on the 23rd?
The number on the 23rd that the water revenue target was $6,152,000.
Okay.
And now it's $6,092,000 even. The difference being is a lower assumed rate for the water assessments.
Thank you.
When you say lower rate for the water use assessment, whose rate are you talking about?
We're talking about the charge from the MWRA.
Yes,
for the MWRA is charged to the town for our consumption in the prior calendar year.
And so but the $6,092,000, that's a 3-year average estimation, right?
Correct, but that was reduced because I was taking this year's assessment and having it level dollar in both 24 and 25. On the June 23rd, I made the assumption of a 4% increase in the assessment in years 24 and 25 over the preliminary estimate for 23. The reason it was a 4% is the MWRA's targeted goal to communities is to have rates not increase by any more than 4%. So that's the methodology I was using.
But on a percentage basis, so the assessment we get is a function of everybody else's usage.
In terms of water, no, water is billed based upon your actual usage from the MWRA in the prior calendar year to the fiscal year. So for instance, the assessment fiscal 23, which began on July 1st.
Yeah.
And the MWRA assessment is based upon the actual water that we consume from the MWRA for calendar year 21 from January 1st to December 31st.
Right, but it's a percentage of everybody. So if the total charge out from Mass Water is $100 and we were 10% one year, right? But then the next year, everybody else reduced their consumption. They're still charging $100, but we didn't change our consumption, our percentage goes up to change it.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That certainly can happen. It's more meaningful on the sewer side because we're 100% billable.
Yeah.
And but on the water side, the town can have some significant variation in its usage, and water usage for calendar year 22, which by December will be the basis of our FY24 assessment, is down from calendar year 21.
Yeah.
And we don't have much longer to get through when we usually need to rely upon the MWRA for supplemental water.
And they meter that, right?
Yes, they
over do. In St. Mary's, is that?
Yes, that's correct.
So from a gaming perspective, there's no indication of how everybody else is doing from a percentage basis.
Not from that. But again, if they're committed to ensuring that their gross revenue requirement will not increase by any more than 4%. And that's the basis of my out-year estimate, because what I can't know is what our actual usage will be, because we're not 100% reliant, and two, of course, what I can't know is what the other communities are using.
Right. Yeah.
So that's why there are many averages in terms of this methodology of forecasting, because there are so many uncontrollable variables.
Yeah.
So
Dave. So
Yes.
so assuming my math is correct, then that would mean that the water enterprise rate increase target would then be 3.87% instead of the 4.89 that was discussed a few weeks ago. Is that or something?
3.87%. That would be correct.
And the 6.29 for the sewer is unchanged. 6.29%. That
Yes, actually, it ended up being 7.1. At the prior meeting, I had a formula error.
Oh, okay. So 7.1% for sewer and 3.87 for water. Thank you.
Yep.
And where's that? I don't see.
Okay, that's the next one. I'll get to that. So the very first page, what you're seeing is you see the sewer at the top, and this is the packet for today. Sewer at the top, water at the bottom. Is showing what the rates are currently for sewer and what the rates are currently for water. Our estimates in terms of billable volume is those 5-year averages. And again, there are 3 averages of, that we look at for sewer. It's just one average, billable sewer. In the case of water, we have what we refer to as the domestic usage and irrigation usage. So there are 2 meters. And in the case of the irrigation rates, they are higher than the domestic water use. So hence I need to have an estimate on the irrigation side as well as the domestic side. Of course, the last couple of years have been very volatile in terms of usage because of COVID-19. We saw a notable decline in commercial usage, but that's starting to recover. And we saw a significant increase in domestic usage or household residential usage because more people were home. So they were using their own water and not their employer's water, which was interesting. And, one of the things individual select board members would say is, although the rates had not changed, they would be stopped and say, well, why did you increase the water rate so much? My water bill is so high. It was their personal usage. Right. And multiple times, Cecilia's office, Cecilia Semchak, by the way, who works for DPW, and she runs the administrative side of DPW is they would calls suggesting that we had to erase the rates because my water bill is much higher, but then they would show them, well, this is how much water you used in 2019, this is how much water you used in 2020, and this is how much more water you used in calendar year 2020.
Or power wash in your house.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. And all the kids were home, so they were all back using the shower rather than at school. So, those are the averages, and of course, the most volatile number of those three is the irrigation. We have a wet year; people use less water, and drier years they use more water. So, so everything stands alone right now. The rate structure, the select board takes no action. We're looking at a forecasted deficit of $589,000 in the sewer enterprise from our target. And on the water side, we're looking at $227,000 shortfall. I also provide to the right of that what the sewer rates mean to the average household. And the average is a US standard that's used of 12,000 cubic feet of water usage per year. And in Needham, the basis of billing sewer is your water usage. And that's the water usage through your domestic meter. If you have an irrigation meter, that is not captured in the sewer, on the sewer side. And so currently in the current rates, the average household would have a bill of $1,225 per year. And on the water side, this is domestic usage. We don't have an average in irrigation because one, not everybody has irrigation, and two, it's a very volatile number. It's harder to capture. Anyways, that would be $472, or the annual water bill for Needham under the current rates is $1,698 for a year, which puts us in the middle of the rate annual cost in comparison to the communities that we compare ourselves to, local communities and local communities that are part of the MWRA. So the next part was now what approaches can we take to close that gap? And ideally, again, we would want to see a rate revenue formula that would get us within the plus or minus 1.5%. Or in other words, you want to be within between 98.5 to 101.5 in terms of revenue generation. My targeted for sewer is $9,370,000. So whatever formula rate structure we have, we want that rate structure to generate something between 98.5 and 101.5 in terms of revenue as being a rate structure that should work. Under the current rate structure,
so why 98.5 versus 105?
Because nothing's perfect in terms of you would have to go to decimals of cents in order to get to match your perfect number. So you're never going to get the exact number you're raising. So something so a margin of error in terms of your formula, a 1.5%, I think is a number that is reasonable to assure that we'll probably hit the revenue target, or perhaps go over it, or be slightly under.
It's an enterprise fund, right?
And that's why it's critical, because it's taxes can't close that gap.
Right. So the fund balance, I haven't looked at it, what's in there, but do you take into account like sort of your ending fund balance and how much if you miss your target? So if you hit 98.5%.
we're going to certainly have an impact on our fund balance. We do have a fund balance, our retained earnings target. There are two approaches, but we primarily rely on what we call the financial model, that our retained earnings should never fall below 15% of the prior year's actual revenue.
Oh.
So so we never want to spend below that. Our retained earnings were kept higher because we know that we had some sizable capital projects coming up, and we've been trying to build so we won't be overly reliant upon debt service. Right. But the other thing is that also has helped us fund operations the last couple of years, because obviously we need $9.3 million, and we're not bringing in $9.3 million. So we've been using retained earnings.
Okay.
So with that, so back to the percentage. So based upon the structure as it is now, we theoretically would only generate in sewer 93.7% of our target under the rate structure. In the case of water, we would generate 96.3%, both of them outside of the target range. So the different scenarios that came up, the first one that I came up that I'm showing is what's the impact of just what's your shortfall, which was about 7.1% on the sewer side and 3.87% on the water side, just taking all the current rates and increasing them by that percentage. Don't make any change to the basic service charge, which is currently for sewer $9 per quarter, and for the water side $15 per quarter. And
Dave, did you move? Excuse me. Did you move? Are you on the same worksheet, or did you advance?
Thank you for reminding me. Yep, we're on page 2. Very good. Thank you.
I was still seeing red. So okay.
So in this case, with the rate structures of increasing all the sewer rates by 7.1%, you would see the step 1 rate, which is currently $9.08 per 100 cubic feet, right there. An increase of 7.1% would be $9.72. And incrementally, that would be the same for each of the rates increasing. Implementing that rate structure would actually generate a surplus. Our target of $9,370,000, we would estimate that we'd generate $9,403,000, or basically just under $33,000 over our target, or 100.3% of our target range. The impact on the average household, that table right there, would notice an increase under this rate structure of $84.24, or a 6.9% increase. Yeah.
Sorry if you've mentioned this already, but why is it that sewer has such a gap? Like water doesn't seem to have as much of a gap. So why is it that we're coming in with a larger gap on the sewer side?
Several factors. They're not exactly the same customer base, same customer base. Everybody has water, not everybody has sewer. Because we have a portion of town that's just sewer only because they have septic tanks.
Yeah.
That's
just water only.
Water only. Yeah. So that's one factor. The second factor is, of course, we have the irrigation, which is a higher rate charge per 100 cubic feet. Helps subsidize the domestic use. The third factor is the cost basis of the water is not running as high as the sewer side. And on sewer, the predominant number is the MWRA assessment.
Right.
So those were all the factors. And the last thing is, of course, the Coca-Cola effect is losing 100% of their billed sewer usage was a notable reduction in that revenue stream.
Was it? Oh.
Yes. So those are the all the contributing factors of why that gap was greater than the water gap.
And so I don't want to go down a rabbit hole here, but the wastewater meters themselves, do you like, it is a rabbit hole, but I won't bring it up. Sorry.
Mike Retzky, do you know if the MWRA has been out to calibrate?
I don't know. I can find out from Stevie next week.
Okay, very good. I know they were looked at back in 2019, the MWRA, because we were questioning the flow. And again, the flow entering Needham from the west and the flow leaving Needham to the east. And I know there were questions on that, and it was again within the tolerance range. But here it is, 2022. Probably good to have them relook. So that'll be good, Mike, to know. But yes, that is something we're mindful of.
So,
sorry, Mike.
So you guys are talking specifically the sewer? Or you
the sewer. No, we're talking about the sewer. The meters are measuring the flow because the degree of volatility.
They're very finicky.
No, we have EST that comes in. We have 10 or 12 sites that we monitor flows in our system, and EST comes out and continually checks those. And we're looking to upgrade that whole system right now because, unfortunately, it's been in the ground for about 9 years. As long as this is the same system, and we're looking to upgrade all those flow meters to make sure we continue to monitor them accurately. And now they all need to be upgraded based on software changes, and also from the old 3G to the 5G now. So we'll be doing that also.
So on the water side, again, doing a 3.87% increase to the rates. And this gets back to everything in terms of the range between 98.5 to 101.5, means that our model is sufficient tolerance. We would have a shortfall of $2,500, just under $2,600, but that's almost 100% of the revenue target. That would result in a increase in the annual bill on the water side for the average household of $15.72, a 3.3% increase. Overall, if this was the models that were built, and I should be mindful that each page that I show you, they're not, I'm showing in terms of what the combined impact is, but each model can stand on its own. In other words, you don't, the committee does not need to recommend, okay, we're going to adopt the 7.1 and 3.87% uniform rate increases to recommend to the board. You could recommend the 7.1, a uniform rate increase on the sewer, but take a different approach for water, because the key is the model is for that specific enterprise fund to be in balance. So, but for display purposes, I show them together. So in this case, if these options were implemented, the average household would look at an annual increase of just under $100 a year, or a 5.9% increase in the rate. The next scenario looks at, again, keeping the basic rates the same. That's the base surcharge, base service charge, $9.
Advance the sheet.
Thank you. Yeah. Would increase the would not increase the basic service charge of $9 for sewer and $15 for water per quarter. We would look at increasing the step one rate just by 2.5%. So in sewer, there's $9.30 per 100 cubic feet versus the current rate of $9.08. So just a 2.5% increase in the step one rate. And then looked at increasing the other rates, not by some flat percentage amount, but do what's called the step up, is the incremental increase as you enter each tier, that that the step two usage would be 10.5% higher than the step one usage, and the step three would be 10.5% higher than the step two usage, and step four would be 10.5% higher than the step three usage. And this is a good time to go back and remind everybody what the current step-up rate structure is. And I held off on saying that because I didn't want to lose you until we talked about step-ups. The current step-up rate structure we have in sewer is from step one to step two is 10.4%. From step two to step three is 7.9%. And from step three to step four, it's 9.1%. So this model here is putting more of the burden on the rates at the step two and step four rate than it is at the step one and step two rates for sewer.
Why would we consider this if it doesn't close the gap?
Because it was important for illustration.
Okay.
To show 6 different models, and I wanted to touch upon the different approaches and different approaches to it and what would it mean. And to Mr. Chair, to the point, that would generate revenue that would leave a shortfall of $291,000 or only 96.9%. So that in itself, that would not achieve what we would want. And but it would have resulted in a 2.8% increase in the annual charge for the average household, whereas compared to the across the board increase just to the rate 7.1%, which was going to be a 6.9% increase on the average household for sewer. In the case of water, the similar.
Dave, do you mind scrolling down a little bit more? The water enterprise part is cut off for me. Okay, perfect. I can see it now. Thank you.
In the case of water, a similar approach is looking at the looking at not touching the step one rate in water, keeping it flat, but putting more of the increase into the step two rate, and basically having that to be a 15% jump up in the rate. So from 318 to 366 represents a 15% increase in the rate, and maintaining the current rate structure at step three and step four, domestic water use. Again, trying to minimize the impact on the larger users and on the lowest users, people that are only in step one, and putting more of the focus at the step two or the step two usage. And on the case of irrigation, increasing the step up from step one water usage to step two to 15%, and from step 2 to step 3 to 15%, but keeping the top rate at the same dollar amount of $8.32. So it's basically taking subsets of your users that would have a greater impact than others. Under this model, we would have a shortfall of $31.5 thousand, but it would be at 99.5% of the target. So it's a workable solution. It would have resulted in an increase in the average water bill of 4.8%, but the combined total of sewer and water would be 3.3%. However, we know the amount for sewer doesn't work.
Okay.
The next model, now I'm remembering, which is on page 4. In this model, we try to, on the sewer side, we increase step 1 and step 2 in the sewer by 4% only. So taking the current rates, again, the reminder, the current rate for step 1 in sewer is $9.08 per 100 cubic feet, increasing that by 4%, which brings us to $9.44, and then taking the step 2 level of $10, which is currently $10.02 per 100 cubic feet, to go into $10.42, which is 4% increase. So, and then having the step up from step 2 to step 3 of 15%, and from step 3 to step 4 of 15%. In that model, we generate a slight surplus in revenue, $1,500. Again, approximately 100% of our revenue target. The impact on the average household would be $56.28, or 4.6%. In the case of water, looking at the increase in the sewer rate was 4.6%. Looking to try to minimize the impact on water, we would not change any of the rates for domestic use in water, but rather increase all the irrigation rates by 10%. So that the rates for domestic use from step 1 at 318 to step 4 to 524 for domestic use is the exact same rate structure that's in place. But in the case of the irrigation rates, we would see the step 1 rate that currently is $5.24 per 100 cubic feet for irrigation increase to $5.76%. And conversely, each of the incremental steps would also be a 10% increase. This still has a slight shortfall, a couple $100, again, within 100% of the revenue target. It's a workable model. That would result in no change in the annual cost for the average household for water, and would have an overall increase of water and sewer of $56.28, or 3.3% for the year.
And what proportion of the irrigation again is revenue? 6.9.
It's about it represents about 22-24%. Some years it can jump up significantly. Some years it can decline. As said, we're looking at the 5-year average. But there is risk with the irrigation being higher, that if you have a dry year, we don't hit those revenue targets. So that's the.
Oh, we have a wet year.
And I'm sorry.
Yeah,
yes, right. Yes.
Yeah.
Conversely, dry years, more irrigation.
Yeah.
Wet years, less irrigation. Although it seems as though irrigation in Needham is it's not really impacted by price.
And that's not price elastic at all.
No, it's just a Needham. In fact, the town of Needham Select Board opted to decline its permit, renewal of its permit, so the town wouldn't be subject to
65 gallons per person.
to the mandatory water restrictions. They're supplemented to the MWRA water, which is more expensive because of the complaints they were receiving from citizens, which they did, and then water rates had to increase, and citizens responded by using more. And in fact, and just quickly go back to the presentation from the prior meeting, is that Needham was only one of 3 communities whose water usage at the last point of measure was 2021 data, actually was using more water in 2021 than they used in 2006. Everyone else was having, except for 2 other communities, all the other communities used less water on average. And again, the driving factor was irrigation, because domestic usage or indoor usage didn't change significantly.
And all the new houses going in have irrigation. So do they have second water meters?
Yes, they do. Yes.
Yes, they would. Yeah.
So now we'll move to the next concept. On the next concept 5, here we look at increasing the base rate, the quarterly use fee. In the case of sewer, which is currently $9 per quarter, increasing that to $12. And again, that's what the point of that is, even if there's nothing billable, we're getting a minimum of $12. We would get a minimum of $12 every quarter, and putting less of the request on the sewer rates. By increasing the quarterly fee from 9 to 12, that would generate $81,500, which reduces the amount of revenue that we have to generate from the step rates from $9,370,000 to $9,288,500. That's why this number here is lower than what you were seeing in all the others. This one right here is a lower, and that's reflecting that the town would be generating from the fixed fee an additional $81,500. Then the structure would then look at raising the rates themselves. That step 1 would see an increase of 2.5%. Step 2 would be a 4.5% increase. Step 3 would be a 7% increase. And step 4 would be a 14% increase. Through this model, we would have a estimated surplus of $5,100, or 100.1% of our revenue target. It would impact the annual bill by $64, or a 5.3% increase.
Sorry, I'm sorry, maybe I missed this. Why is the target revenue lower now?
Because we're generating the fixed fee, the basic service, which comes off the top. Yeah. In the actual revenue number, we reduced by fixed revenue streams. We reduced the number by the amount of the general fund contribution.
So that revenue number doesn't include the fixed fee.
In terms of when I talk about the average impact, it does. But in terms of the revenue number generated from the rates for billable usage, no.
So like on page 3, the 9.4 doesn't include the fixed fee either.
Correct, on all of them. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But very important to understand the methodology. If you go back to the packet from the June 23rd meeting,
I don't want to take up.
Oh, no, but I think it's an important point to understand how the math is working. On page 9 of the June 23rd packet.
Oh, it's a roll forward. Okay.
Yeah. You can see that the fixed rate revenue, that's like the basic service fees that we're collecting. So that so those are the adjustments to determine how I get to the revenue target from the user rates.
Okay.
So and that's in the case of the sewer. In the case of the water, a similar concept here, increasing the quarterly basic service fee from the current $15 per quarter to $18 per quarter. By doing that, that generates another $100,000 in revenue, which reduces our required revenue target from $6,092,000 down to $5 million. Yeah, boy, $5,992,000. In this approach, by increasing the basic service fee, we would look at not changing the step 1 rate. So it's currently $3.18 per 100 cubic feet, would retain that. Not the step 2 rate, it's currently $3.39 per 100 cubic feet. It would stay at $3.39. And it would increase the step 3 rate, which is currently $4.26. It would increase it by 3%, or $4.39 per 100 cubic feet. And the top step would increase from $5.24 to $5.40, a 3% increase. We would look at a lower increase in the rate structure for irrigation at that each of the rates would increase by 3%. This model would generate a revenue that would be a little over 22,000 short of the target, but it's 99.6% of the target, which is workable in our modeling method. This would result in an annual increase in the average water bill of $13.56, or a 2.9% increase, and an overall increase in the annual sewer water bill of $78, or a 4.6% increase. The next scenario, scenario 6, and I'll scroll down. We got the same idea, increasing the basic service fee for sewer from $9 to $12, or a $3 increase, but trying to lower the impact at the higher rates where most residents fall. So the step 1 would, under this, would be increased not by 2.5%, but by 3%. But the step 2 rate, rather than increasing it by 4.5%, increased by 3.5%. And the step 3 rate, rather than increasing by 7%, as proposed in the prior scenario, have it increase only by 5%. And the top rate would still increase by the 14%. A shortfall of $36,000, which is 99.6% of our target, a workable model, but we would be looking at an annual increase in the sewer for the average household of $54, or a 4.4% increase. Whereas the other model, where we were increasing the basic service fee, where there was a greater burden at the step 2 and step 3 rate, where the average household falls in. The people who use less water would have realized the benefit under this model, a less expensive increase. But under this model was a 5.3% increase. This model, the low end consumers would would notice a greater percentage increase, but it's smoothing out the impact of the rate increase to the average single family home. And as also a similar concept on the water side is in order to would be to increase the same increase to the basic service fee, increasing from $15 to $18 a quarter, and just increase all the step rates, both irrigation and the domestic water use by 2%. So in other words, the step one rate of $3.18 would become $3.26. And each of the rates, 347, 437, 537, all reflect the 2% increase over the current rates. And the same thing in the irrigations, which would mean that it was a lesser increase in the irrigation rates and more of an increase in the water rates, but not as high of an impact on the higher end of the water usage. And again, the reminder, the impact of raising the rates at step 3 and step 4, is that when people conserve, that's where the first loss of revenue happens. It happens as the last bill, gallon bill. The second thing is more of our commercial operations fall into step 3 and step 4. And certainly the last few years, the select board have been sympathetic that all the increased costs that businesses have been suffering, they don't want to have a disproportionate amount of the rates borne by the businesses in order to mask the cost of service to the residents. So that's over the years, that's why there's been sensitivity and not always trying to push everything at the top rates. But again, I've showed some models where we do have significant increases, but also showing a model where they're paying the incremental increase that's comparable to what maybe a resident would be seeing. And in this model, it would generate a surplus of just under $18,000 from the targeted revenue target, or 100.3%. Again, something that we wanted to do. The increase would be $21.96 in the annual water bill, or a 4.7% increase, which is higher than the prior model, but would result in an overall lower combined water and sewer bill of $76, or a 4.5% increase versus 4.6%. And then the last of the scenarios for consideration is looking at on the sewer, increasing the fee from 9 to 12, and trying to smooth out the impact of the rate increase at the higher end of the sewer. So looking at a 2.5% increase in step 1 for sewer, looking at a 5% increase at the step 2 sewer, looking at an 8% increase at the step 3, but looking at a lower rate increase at step 4 of rather than 14% of 8%. The result of this model is we still have a shortfall of $67,000 from the target, but is 99.3% of that target. So a workable model. It would result in an annual increase for the average household of $70, or a 5.7% increase. And then looking at the water is, okay, let's leave all the rates alone. Don't increase any of the consumption rates, but just increase the basic service fee, not by $3 per quarter, but by $6. So it would increase from $15 to $21 per quarter. That would generate $200,000 in revenue. That would reduce our revenue target from the consumption rates by another 100,000. Or now we're at $5,892,000. Under this, increasing the basic service fee by $6 per quarter, going from $15 to $21 per quarter, and not increasing any of the consumption rates, it would generate a shortfall of just $27,000, or 99.5% of our revenue target, and which is workable in the model. It would result in an annual increase of $24 for the average customer, or 5.1%, or a combined increase of water and sewer of $94, or a 5.5% increase. So those are the different approaches and different models, looking at putting the burden of the increase at one end or the other, looking at it, doing it uniformly, looking at recovering some of the required revenue through the fixed fee in order to keep the consumption rates slightly lower than if we kept the fixed fee at the current rates, which is $15 per quarter for water and $9 per quarter for sewer for the per quarter per resident.
Dave? So I have a question on slide 4, which on the face of it seems to me personally like the most efficient scenario that you put out. I mean, the sewer section, the one that generates like a $1,500 surplus, that seems, to me, it makes a lot of sense. But the water enterprise with the irrigation rates would increase by 10%. What would happen if that 10% increase in irrigation actually resulted in a reduced amount of usage on the irrigation side?
Depending upon the degree that it was reduced, it would be we could have a significant shortfall, which would require us to probably need to adjust rates in the following year more so than would have otherwise been required.
That was my second question, actually, which was I had 2 questions. Assuming any of these rates are actually increased, all things equal, what's the plan for future rate increase schedules? Is there next year or every year after, or undetermined at this point?
Well, it's undetermined, but based upon, and this is why we do that 3-year average, the idea is we present rate structures that should be able to work for 3 years, but if necessary, that we have to tweak to increase the rates. And usually it would be a small adjustment that has to happen, that let's say cost of like running slightly higher than forecasted, or that consumption trends change significantly, that we'd have to adjust the rates upward. But the idea when we look at these 3 years is that the rate structure recommended is ideally to work for a 3-year window, but would be revisited annually in case there's just slight variation adjustments. And when I say a slight variation adjustments, in the 1 or 2% overall impact.
You know what would be really helpful on the irrigation thing is to have, and I know this isn't, it's just as a proxy, the number of second water meters.
Yeah.
So on like page 3 of the June 23rd thing,
yep,
where it has the second water meters, to have the number of second water meters that are in place to give us an idea of the consumption per second water meter. Because I think, so I have a second water meter, as I would, because I knew about these things, right? And so what's Berger's first name? Michael?
Harold.
What?
Harold.
Harold. So
I'm sorry. Nice to meet you, John. I'm Harold.
Oh, nice to meet you. Yeah. So I mean, it really, as a homeowner, it matters, like that increase matters only relative to the cost of keeping your lawn, watering it relative to all the other costs associated with that. So if you're paying for a landscaper, so if it represents like 20% of the cost of maintenance, it may not, you're like, they were saying there's no price elasticity, there's very little price elasticity of that. It's basically, it doesn't seem to change much.
It's more being a dry year or a wet year.
Right.
Because you look at this, you look at this history, 2015 to through 2021, and this is basically the time frame that we've had a building boom, knockdowns and such. But you can see there's some volatility. 2015 was 300,000 100 cubic feet, and it went up a significant jump just 1 year, and that was represented that it was a dry summer. That's greater usage. And in the following year, there was a drop down from 374 down to 341. But each of these years, there was an increase in larger homes. Yeah. And then you saw a significant, you had even another drop in 2018. Again, you're adding more homes, but the usage. So there is great volatility. And then 19, a slight, a notable increase from 284 to 335. And then a scale back in 2020, and then a significant jump in 2021. And a lot of that represents the COVID year. And there was a notable jump in increase in both inside usage and outside usage when people were home in fiscal 21. But to your point, I will see, I can certainly get the data as it is now.
It might be helpful.
Would you have that data number, second meters we had?
I can get that, yeah.
Great, over that time frame, 2015 to 2021. Yeah. Okay.
You know, I would be surprised if 5% of the people in Needham that are watering their lawn would do an analysis of a 10% increase in the irrigation rate as compared to what they spend overall in landscaping or outdoor maintenance. I run around this town every morning, and people, they put their sprinklers are on, right? I mean, even when it's raining. So I think there's, people want their green lawns, and they're going to spend the irrigation to keep them green. I personally, I like this scenario here. I think it puts the kind of least pain across the board as it relates to the other scenarios. It's certainly, on average, the least expensive increase per household.
Other comments and thoughts? John, and when we first brought this up, John Talarico mentioned in your thoughts.
So I actually prefer the one on page 6. Part of it has to do with expectations management. From a public policy perspective, I don't like the idea of, hiding isn't the right word, but sweeping the increase under a rug, which is kind of what that does with the, basically moving it over to irrigation.
And sweeping it under the rug?
Yeah. I think that if the cost of service is going up, and mass water, I mean, obviously we can't use the mass water 4% as a proxy necessarily, because we only get like 30% of the water from mass water. But it seems that from a longer term view, when you create the idea that your rates aren't going up, like your costs are going up, even though the cost of service is going up, at some point that catches up with you. And this irrigation thing it's less, I think, I want to say it's less predictable, less consistent than the regular water usage. So to move that increase to a less predictable, less consistent sorts of revenue, I think is kind of, dicey. I mean, I understand the idea of coming back to people and saying, yeah, your rates didn't go up. It's just irrigation that went up. It sounds good, but I think from a financial management perspective, it may not be the right thing to do. And I like,
yeah, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that or agree with that's how it would be positioned. I think, we've always been transparent of what's increased and what's decreased. If you're talking about risk per scenario, and you think there would be a higher risk associated with the accuracy of that particular one, I think then we should probably look at the risk associated with each of these scenarios and the volatility. So yeah.
I like the water on page 6. I mean, for me, that one's simple. And part of my issue, obviously I'm new to this process, but I don't really understand the rationale between the percentage changes in the existing steps. So changing steps by percentages without understanding what's the basis for the prior percentages is kind of like it's just modeling essentially. So, that's why I like the water enterprise on page 6, and I like the sewer one on page 2. And I kind of secondarily like the water one on page 4.
So I'm in the middle. I prefer the sewer enterprise on page 4, but I actually agree with John. I agree with the water one on page 6. I mentioned on the prior meeting that doing this type of stuff for a living, it's more efficient and more, in my opinion, more predictable when you have a base fee increase. So I realize it's approximately $20 higher than the one that's on slide 4. But the irrigation one, I think it's a lot of volatility, and we're still trying to recapture or make up for the loss of Coca-Cola, et cetera. I also understand the point that John was alluding to, which is rate shock in the future, where if the irrigation plan doesn't work out as we're thinking about it now, then that might mean a higher, sticker shock in the future, and whether it be in next year, 2 years, 3 years, whenever, of an actual volumetric increase or a flat increase. I also think, though, that the water enterprise one on page 6 could be a starting point, maybe a mixture of a base volumetric and an irrigation increase. So that's where but I like the sewer enterprise one on 4.
So John, you're saying, sorry, Harold, you're saying on slide 4, the sewer enterprise with the 2.8 annual change?
Yeah, that's slide 4. That's the one that's step 1 and 2, 4% increase with a step up 15%. It results in basically close to a very, very, very small surplus of $1,500.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right.
Yeah, I think that one makes a lot of sense to me. But I'm more towards not towards a 10% irrigation increase, and more towards the water enterprise structure, the quarterly fees steps of that on page 6, the one that has the $767 increase. So like I said, Dave, is it possible that there could be a mixture of a quarterly fee increase, a step increase, and an irrigation increase on that? So that's kind of what I'm thinking about, how I'm thinking about this.
The quick answer is yes. There certainly can be a mixture of the base fee, domestic use, and irrigation. On the sewer, the one thing it's important to note, however, under scenario 4 for sewer, which does generate a slight surplus, this puts an extraordinary burden on the commercial effectively at this rate of 1378, that would be a 17% increase in their assessments. So which is a lot. It's the 1378 at the top rate isn't the highest rate around. So there are still communities that charge their businesses more, but specific to Needham, that would be a noteworthy increase on the at the highest rate. But at the same token, all the revenue that we lost from Coca-Cola was at the highest rate. So
yeah,
I think it is, one could rationally argue that they too were benefiting from Coca-Cola being here because the step 4 rate was lower because we had Coca-Cola.
Yeah, it was
and now that we don't have
subsidy by Coca-Cola. Yeah.
What are thoughts on the first scenario, uniform increase 7.1 on sewer and uniform 387 on water? I mean, that seems, if we were to assign risk to each of these scenarios, this one probably seems like the most risk averse and most predictable.
Yeah.
The water component is, it makes sense. It's obviously more expensive for everyone, but it makes sense intuitively, what the water side at least.
And then perhaps less burden on the commercial.
Well, certainly it's not disproportionately affecting the commercial under that scenario, but it's certainly impacting free resident on a percentage basis equally.
You gave us too many choices, Dave. That's
so why? So on page 2, that the uniform increase all rates by 3.8%. So why 3.8%? As opposed to like
it's just
3.9.
Well, I could do that, but I was just saying, what was the percentage of the shortfall? I took the shortfall percentage on page 1 was 3.87%.
Oh, I see.
It's just, okay, what do I have to do to all the rates just on a percentage basis to get rid of the gap? That's all that. And I always use that as the starting point to just put it in perspective before we get into methodology and shifting burden from one group of payers to another.
And so if you, anyway, so if that was like 4%, then there would be a surplus problem.
Oh yes, it was an even 4% would definitely generate a surplus.
Yeah, and there's bond durations. There's no like, you can't say that for each percentage change in the rate what the impact is. Like correct. So yeah.
Correct, because again, consumption efforts results in the greatest revenue loss. I'm sorry, conservation.
Conservation. Yeah.
And we have noticed that businesses have been more receptive to containing costs than residents.
Yeah.
They seem to, in part, certainly one is financial. 2 is certainly portraying a good image to the community of trying to show that they're being mindful stewards of the environment and avoiding unnecessary water use. We've seen more efforts on the commercial side to reduce consumption than on the residential side. The other thing, of course, the committee could do is recommend two models for sewer and for water as being preferable in having the select board have the opportunity to weigh in terms of which direction they would prefer to go. Do they want to shift a disproportionate burden upon the commercial sector versus the residential, or do they want to have a model that's more evenly handed, treating everybody on the same, rather than coming in with just one model for them to say yay or nay to? Certainly, the committee has taken that approach in some times of having an A choice or a B choice. And other times it's just, this is the recommended change the rates.
Dave, talking about, I think it was the water on page 6, the 17.8% in the largest users, you get the impression that would not be palatable to the board at this point, given your previous statements about their desire to not have that type of burden shifting.
That has been true historically with the board. What is, I also must note, is since the last time this committee's been before the board, we have 3 new faces on the select board, and we do not know their individual philosophies in terms of rate structure. So that's a little out of care. I would have had a higher degree of confidence of what the reaction would be of the board 2.5 years ago. It's a greater unknown. And hence why I was thinking, another reason I was thinking having the committee recommend an A-B option, because there are 3 out of the 5 members, this is new to them.
Okay. Oh, actually, I misspoke. I was referring to the sewer enterprise. I'm sorry, on page 4. That's the one I think that you mentioned. The 17.8% would be.
Yes, yes, page 4.
I mean, there's a presumption, at least, in my opinion, that a lot of those costs, though, if they went on the commercial side, would just be passed through to those customers of those businesses in one way, shape, or form. Usually is. So one way or another, the retail customer, so to speak, will be paying for it. Okay.
John, what was the scenarios that you were most attracted to?
So initially, I liked Water Enterprise on page 6 because it's simple. Although I do see
that was the quarterly fee of $3 and then 2%. Yeah.
I mean, on page 2, and part of it is that I like even percentages. But I see on page 2 that's, everything increases 3.87%. Therefore, that's like an annual change of 3.3. So I think both are almost equal weight. Maybe the one on page 2 might be more equal weight. I like the sewer one on page 2 because that one treats everybody the same pretty much. And what I'm going to do, and actually what helps me understand this is actually having a matrix which just has the change in revenue by step by auction, because seeing that you really can see what the impact is by customer. But anyway, long answer to your question. I think I like sewer on page 2, and the water either on page 2 or on page 6. That's it. I don't, the other ones where you're talking about increasing different steps and different percentages gets,
yeah.
you know,
So I think then,
are we supposed to make a recommendation this meeting, or is this for discussion?
The committee can vote to make the recommendation now. However, we can certainly have one more meeting before the select board to finalize the vote, whatever y'all are comfortable with.
Okay.
Okay, so there seems then to be some consensus around sewer enterprise uniform 7.1% increase and uniform water enterprise 3.87. Also, consensus around the water enterprise quarterly fee, $3 increase in all steps by 2%. John, did you have an opinion on that one?
That was your second choice, John.
No, that was
the second choice. Okay, good.
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Okay, yeah. And then Harold,
I like. Okay. I agree on water for 2 and 6 are the most appealing to me, with caveat of an exploration of, a lower increase in irrigation rates. Tack that on so whether the base or the volumetric fee percentage can be reduced a little bit. Kind of a mixture for the water, but 2 and 6 I think are a good foundational starting point. The sewer I think is a little bit more. There's one that I personally like, but I acknowledge like I said, I still like the one on page 4 for the sewer enterprise, but I acknowledge the political realities. So I acknowledge and understand that. I'm not sure if I like the across the board 7.1% increase on page 2. I'd have to think about that for a little bit more, a little bit longer.
So Harold, you were saying that that on page 4, that businesses are absorbing more of the increase, that they're less price elastic, that they would just pass that on. And I guess which businesses are impacted by that? And
restaurants are heavily
impacted.
the
Restaurants, yeah.
And there, of course, the one industry got hit
pretty bad
from COVID.
Struggling the most, yeah.
But like I said, though, as you mentioned yourself, David, I agree that there was a long time subsidy by Coca-Cola in terms of, I guess, on an academic basis, in terms of efficiency, that would probably on an academic basis. That's why I'm saying, and I acknowledge, like I said, again, the political realities. But it just makes intuition-wise, it makes the most sense to me. But
okay, so it seems both Harold and John, you're not at the point to take a vote, if I'm reading you both, and you want time to digest the information. Is that correct?
Well, John, what are you thinking with respect to the options here?
Me?
John, JT, Highland JT or Lindbridge?
The chair, Mr. Chairman. Okay. What is your?
So I do. I do like the sewer enterprise with the straight increase of 7.1. I also could just get behind the straight increase of 387 across the board. And then my second water enterprise would be increasing the irrigation by 10%, but I seem to be kind of on my own on that one. And then for secondary sewer, step 1 and 2, 4%, and step up 15%.
Mr. Chair, what I think I can do is obviously shrink the package and give a little more detail of comparisons in terms of revenue per step. So you could have that to look at in terms of voting. The one thing I did notice is no one identified any of the sewer structures that there would be an increase in the base fee. Was that an oversight, or folks certain that no, I don't want to change the basic service fee?
Yeah.
The one on page 5, Dave, would be acceptable to me as well. The sewer one, what, $3 and 2.5%, 4.5%, 7 and 14.
Yeah, like I said, I don't understand the reason for the existing percentage changes between step. So changing percentages on something, I don't, that's why I didn't. Anything that has to do with changing percentages, like this one 8%, that one 9%, just doesn't.
Like another historically, how it's
what's the basis for
the basis was not scientific, it was political, and the fact that the board said, okay, let's not increase the base step, let's put more of the increase at this level, and then mathematically that's how those steps but in terms of the percentage of what the step up is, there's never been a conversation other than that there should be an increase. But what should be the incremental increase per step? There has not been a conversation in that minute for at least 15 years.
Yeah.
So certainly on the case of water, 2 seems to be, everyone seems comfortable with 2 being one of the options. And then back up is either option 6 or option 4. I will put together a packet that looks at those in terms of revenue generation at first step. And if you would like, I could introduce increasing using the model of page 2, water is showing what a slightly lesser percentage increase, but increasing the base fee. So you can look at a slighter increase in the consumption charge versus the fixed fee. So you can make that comparison. And that would be the comparison. And on 6, which does increase the base fee by $3, but increases all the steps uniformly by 2%. I believe it was Harold that was mentioning that perhaps seeing not as much of an increase on the irrigation because of the greater volatility that I could show if we did only like a 1% increase in the irrigation rates, what that would translate into. Did I capture your thoughts, Harold?
Yes, yeah, I think, I mean, to me, at 6, the water enterprise structure, the proposal, there's a lot, I think that a lot of options that could be done with it, especially, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I agree. I absolutely have no problem with increasing the irrigation fee as well, but I personally would prefer to see a mixture. So, yeah, I think, like I said, that water enterprise on 6 would be a good starting point, in my opinion.
Okay, so Dave, then why don't we go ahead and do that? And if we could just also just narrow down, so I think we agree on the options that we don't want to consider, and then just maybe move them into an appendix or something else. Because I think if we just have it narrowed down, then that's a little bit of progress forward, right?
Yep, and that's the approach that I will have. So.
Okay.
Water option on page 2, water option on page 6, and I will introduce a page 2 water option as a 2.2, where we have an increase in the base fee and a slighter percentage decrease, so that it's still a workable model. And in the case of the sewer, I would do the same thing. Everyone seen the sewer on 2, the 7.1% increase, but see what I could do about reducing the 7.1% uniform increase by increasing the basic fee and what that would look like. So basically I'm giving you 2 scenarios under page 2 options, and I'm giving you 2 scenarios under the page 6 water enterprise option. And so the only thing more is there one of the other sewer models that you would like me to consider?
No, something.
Dave, can you repeat again? I was in the middle of looking at one of these tables. Which sewer models did you say that you're going to continue exploring? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Right now, there's only one, and that was the increase at 7.1%. That's on page 2. But what I would do is see what would be the impact of increasing the basic service fee from $9 to $12, and hence having a smaller percentage increase in the consumption charge rates.
Can you also take a look at the sewer one on page 4? Because I think the chairman and I were thought about that one, but obviously, lowering the business commercial end percentage, and maybe involving like a base rate increase or a base fee increase or something like that, if possible.
Yeah, so that's similar to, and my numbering is different than what I'm looking at, but so there is one where we have a base increase of $3, and then 3, 3.5, 5, 14%. So maybe some kind of hybrid of putting that base fee increase into the scenario that Harold was just talking about.
The scenario on page 4. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
Okay.
And I know we have scheduled 3 minutes left, and there are a few more items on the agenda. So are we good to, with those recommendations, have another look at it during our next meeting?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, Dave, the next item we had was the stormwater fees.
Yes, I just wanted to remind the board that when we were last meeting in earnest was back in 2020, where and actually recommendations this board went through to the select board back in 2019 when they were looking at an implementation of a stormwater fee. And one of the recommendations the committee had, which the select board was receptive, that should a stormwater fee be implemented, that this committee be charged with doing the annual review of that rate as well in order to make recommendations to the select board. And I just, I want to know that the committee is still receptive of asking for that additional charge by the select board. And if so, then we would have conversations about the proposal, bringing back the proposal that was going to go to the select board, which was done by a different committee. It was an ad hoc committee that was put together to involve members of the finance committee, members of this committee, and citizens at large. And there was a whole recommendation to go forward, but COVID struck in the public hearing that was scheduled the week the governor shut down the state, never materialized, but it's been a few years. Stormwater is a reality that has to be addressed. And we got to, the select board is going to take up the subject matter again. So if the board is receptive to the recommendations of the citizen committee and something that this committee was receptive to as being the committee that should the town implement stormwater fee, it would be the advisory board to the select board recommending future changes to the stormwater fees. If and I don't even need a vote of the committee, just want to get a sense. And if so, I'll build that into our calendar of meetings for the fall.
I personally don't have any objection to it.
Same here. I'm fine with it.
Wasn't on the last town meeting the expenses moved into the sewer enterprise fund? Was it?
That's just accounting, but
Yeah.
we've been accounting for that in the sewer fund. Yeah. But it's still paid by the general fund. Oh, that's why there's a transfer of the general fund money into the sewer enterprise fund every single year. Because if we didn't have a sewer system, we still have stormwater obligations. Think about those communities as septic only. They still must address their water runoff. And so they're appropriate. But from an operational side, we budgeted in the sewer enterprise because people who do the work are in the sewer enterprise. Okay. So that, the recommendations that we're going to the select board is that the general fund would still pay for the operational expenses to deal with stormwater and these requirements, but that there would be a fee for the capital portion. Okay. And those monies would accrue in a dedicated reserve to deal with the capital infrastructure, which is in the tens of millions of dollars for cost. So.
Oh. Okay. Any other topics?
I guess next meeting for regrouping. The board's going before the select board on the 26th of July. We have some, and unfortunately, the legislature hasn't acted yet on extending the current rules for holding public meetings. So we're back to the old-fashioned way of that we'd all, other than in the case of a committee of 5, other than one member, everybody would have to be in the meeting. I'm still hoping the legislature does something to extend it, but right now we go back to the old rules. Tomorrow, I know they're
wait, is it tomorrow or the 15th?
Tomorrow's the 15th. I'm sorry.
Wait, tomorrow's the 15th?
No. I misspoke.
Okay.
I'm carrying so many calendars.
I have something to do. Sorry.
Yeah, no. The 15th is a week from today. So, if I recall, some of you are not available next week.
I'm away next week, so it would need to be the following
week of the 8th. The week of the 18th. What is a good day? but we have to assume at this point that it's going to have to be an in-person meeting. So that means and after a 6 p.m. start.
Okay. Do you know? I think almost any night that week.
Same here. I'm wide open for an evening.
Yeah.
For an evening, yes. Catherine, your schedule is important.
I can do the 19th through the 22nd. I can't do Monday.
Okay.
Good.
Okay, so the 19th.
Let's do the 19th. Yeah.
Tuesday, the 19th. Okay. And I'll schedule it for 6 p.m. Is that convenient for you all?
Yeah, we'll make it work.
Okay. 6 p.m. and it will be here in the Great Plain Room. So I'll get that posted for you, Mr. Airport. And I will try to have all the material to you weekend before. I'm not going to say Friday because inevitably I'm probably going to be putting finishing touches on it during the weekend, but you'll have at least one business day to look at it.
Okay. All right. Any other topics?
No.
No problem.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in
Who
favor?
seconded that?
Me.
Aye.
All in favor? Aye. Aye.
Yes.
3-0. And we're adjourned
Excellent.
at 1:50.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks all.
Have a nice weekend.
Thanks all. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. See you later.